warehouse burned for 3 hours before the fire department arrived. By then, there was nothing left but ash and the charred skeleton of what had once been a pharmaceutical buyer's briefcase. Sarah Miller, or Elena Rostova, or Claire Bennett, depending on which passport she was holding that day, was somewhere over the Atlantic by the time the sirens stopped wailing. Elias Miller sat in a small diner outside the city and ate eggs he couldn't taste. But that wasn't how it started. 13 hours earlier, at 7:30 on a rainy evening, Elias knelt on the plush cream carpet of his living room, picking up scattered National Geographic magazines near the mahogany coffee table. Rain drummed against the window pane. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Warm, yellow lamplight cast long shadows across the room. And Elias moved with the comfortable rhythm of a man performing his small domestic rituals, the kind of man who straightened things without being asked, who noticed when the world was slightly out of order. His fingers brushed against something wedged behind the bottom shelf of the side table. A thick white envelope. The weight of it surprised him. Bond paper, expensive stock. He pulled it out slowly, feeling the heft in his palm. No return address. Just one word stamped in blue ink. Confidential. The door clicked open. Rain scattered against the threshold. Elias slid the envelope into his back pocket, feeling the bulge of it settle against his hip, and stood up as Sarah entered, shaking a wet black umbrella. She was smiling, her face bright and seemingly healthy, her damp hair clinging to her neck. The pasta water boiled over, hissing against the burner. He had found the medical report only an hour earlier. St. Jude Oncology Center. Patient name, Sarah Miller. Diagnosis, stage 4 glioblastoma. Prognosis, 4 to 6 months. The date was from 2 months ago. Now the phone call made a different kind of sense. The report was a cover. At 9 o'clock, Elias heard the heavy thud against the front door. Not a knock, not a ring of the doorbell. A thud, the kind of sound that came from intention and weight. He moved toward the hallway, grabbing a brass umbrella stand, his fingers closing around its cold metal. The door splinters. A man in a dark hoodie lunges through the broken frame. Rain splashes into the entryway behind him. Elias swings the brass stand in a wide arc and catches the man in the shoulder. The impact is solid, real, something his body understands through pure instinct. The intruder punches him in the gut. Air explodes from Elias's lungs. Then a hand closes around his throat, and his back slams against the hallway wall. His vision blurs. His eyes bulge as the air is cut off, as the walls of the hallway tilt sideways. Elias brings his knee up sharply. The grip on his throat loosens. He grabs the man's head and slams it into the mahogany mirror frame. Glass shatters. Blood smears across the shards. The intruder scrambles backward, out into the wet night. Elias slams the broken door shut and locks the deadbolt with bloody fingers. Blood drips from his knuckles onto the white floor. Sarah appears at the top of the stairs in a white robe. She looks at the blood and the broken door. She doesn't scream. She doesn't move toward him to check his injuries. She simply looks at him, her expression flat and almost disappointed. "You weren't supposed to be home for that, Elias," she says. Her voice is eerily calm. Sarah sits at the kitchen table, calmly pouring red wine. Elias stands opposite her, holding a wet towel to his bloody knuckles. His hands are shaking. She takes a sip from her glass, a single sip, tasting it like a connoisseur, and then reaches into her robe pocket. She pulls out a small metallic canister. It's frosted over with cold. A biohazard symbol is stamped on its side. She sets it on the stone counter with a metallic clink. "I'm not dying, Eli," she says, her eyes locking onto his. "This is the cure, not for me, for the highest bidder, We need the money more than the clinic needs a patent. Elias drops the towel. It hits the floor with a wet flop. He backs away from the table, his mind reeling through the implications. The medical report wasn't a diagnosis. It was a prop, a costume she wore to explain any future illness or sudden disappearance. The man at the door, the voice on the phone, the stolen vial, all of it was real. "We?" he says. The word coming out is barely more than a whisper. Sarah takes another sip of wine. Elias pushes his Volvo station wagon to 90 miles per hour. In the rearview mirror, two circular headlights of a black SUV approach rapidly, eating up the distance between them. The highway is empty. Rain streams down the windshield. Trees blur past, dark shapes swallowed by speed. Sarah sits in the passenger seat, gripping the cryo-vial in her lap like a religious icon. She doesn't look afraid. The SUV rams the back of the Volvo. Elias's head jerks forward. Metal crunches against metal. Glass cracks. Sparks fly from the rear bumper. The SUV pulls alongside, level with the driver's door. A window rolls down. A man leans out, holding a steel pipe. He swings it at the passenger window. Safety glass shatters. Glass shards spray over Sarah. She doesn't flinch. Wind rushes through the hole in the window, carrying rain and road noise. Elias slams on the brakes. The SUV overshoots. He jerks the wheel hard to the right, diving onto a dirt logging road. Tires screech. Gravel sprays. Dust clouds rise behind them, obscuring the headlights that had been so close just moments before. The remote mountain cabin appears through the darkness like a ghost, its weathered wood barely visible against the forest backdrop. Elias kills the engine. The rain has stopped. The silence is complete. While Sarah scouts the perimeter outside, Elias enters a dusty bedroom in the back of the cabin. He pulls out a floorboard that looks loose, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Cobwebs cling to the light. He finds a leather satchel. Inside are 3 different passports, all with Sarah's face. Different hairstyles, different eye colors, different names. Elena Rostova, Claire Bennett, Sarah Miller. His heart sinks into his stomach. He digs deeper. A photograph of a young boy. On the back, in handwriting, he recognizes as Sarah's. 2 words and a year. Lucas, 2018. The boy has Sarah's distinctive green eyes. Elias sits back on his heels, holding the photograph, his own ragged breathing the only sound in the cabin. At 2 in the morning, in a warehouse district 20 miles from the city, Sarah stands in the center of a massive industrial space, holding the vial aloft. Above her, fluorescent lights flicker with a harsh, stuttering rhythm. A man in a tailored gray suit stands 20 feet away, flanked by 2 armed guards. The air smells like metal and something chemical. From the shadows behind a crate, a guard spots Elias. The guard draws an expanding baton and lunges. Elias tackles him. Both men crash into a stack of empty metal barrels. They roll on the concrete, Elias throwing desperate punches, his knuckles connecting with whatever parts of the man he can reach. Barrels clang like thunder. Dust rises from the floor. Sarah pulls a small pistol from her waistband and fires at the buyer. The shot misses, hitting the briefcase instead. She dives behind a forklift. Metal pings where the bullet passes through. Elias wrenches the baton away from the guard and strikes him across the temple. The guard goes limp. Elias looks up to see Sarah surrounded by the buyer's men, the vial still clutched in her hand. The warehouse falls into a strange, tense silence. Everyone breathing hard, everyone bleeding. Sarah points her gun at Elias, not at the guards, not at the buyer, directly at Elias. In her other hand, she holds a digital recorder. Her face has become something other than human, smooth, empty, surgical in its coldness. She clicks play. Elias's distorted voice fills the warehouse. I took it. The samples. They're mine now. It's his voice. He's certain of that. But the words have been spliced, rearranged, made to sound like a confession. Sarah's lips curve into something that isn't quite a smile. Every transaction, every email, every fingerprint leads to you, Elias, she whispers. Our whole marriage was a setup for this one exit strategy. She tosses a set of keys at his feet. They jingle on the concrete and come to rest in a puddle of oil. Car keys, a silver keychain, a car registered in a name he doesn't recognize, set up in advance, waiting for him like a trap he's only now falling into. The police sirens wail in the distance, getting louder, getting closer. The buyer and Sarah disappear into the night. They vanish like smoke, like they were never there at all, leaving Elias standing alone in the center of the warehouse, holding the gun Sarah dropped. The distant flicker of blue and red lights sweeps past the high windows. He looks at the photograph of Lucas that he pulled from his pocket. The boy with green eyes. The boy who might not exist. The boy Sarah kept in a safe house he'll never find. The sirens scream. Elias stands perfectly still, the gun hanging at his side, and realizes that he was never her partner. He was never her confidant. He was just a placeholder, a pawn, something to be sacrificed if the game went wrong. But Elias Miller had spent 15 years as a forensic accountant before he married Sarah. 15 years learning to trace money through the shadows, to follow the thread backward from conclusion to origin, to find the lies hidden inside the truth. He had learned patterns. He had learned timing. He had learned that the world runs on paper and digital trails and the invisible architecture of trust. He doesn't run when the sirens get close. Instead, he picks up his phone and hits a preset macro. A recording of the service depth phone call plays silently into the cloud. Uploading, uploading, uploading. Success. Then he pulls the envelope from his back pocket, the one he found in his living room hours ago, a lifetime ago, and he pulls out a second page. A page he never finished reading while Sarah was in the shower, while the pasta was boiling, while he was still just an ordinary man in an ordinary house. The text on the second page reads, "Patient shows no signs of glioblastoma. Test results, negative." It was a test. She had given him the medical report to see if he would keep her secret, to measure his loyalty, to see if he could be broken and rebuilt into something useful for her operation. He had failed the test. Or perhaps, Elias thinks, watching the police lights grow brighter through the warehouse windows, he had passed it. At 4 a.m, at the entrance to an airport hangar, Elias steps from behind a fuel truck. He's clean now, shaved, wearing a fresh jacket. He's holding the real cryo-vial. Sarah reaches for the jet stairs. She stops. Her body goes rigid. Elias holds up a second vial. This one is filled with blue Gatorade. "The silent pact goes both ways, Sarah," he says, his voice steady and calm. "I knew you were lying the moment I found the envelope. I've been recording us for weeks." He gestures to the buyer. The buyer opens Sarah's case. Inside is the fake vial, the Gatorade, the elaborate deception turning back on itself like a snake eating its own tail. The buyer looks at Sarah with lethal intent. He signals his guards. Sarah's face goes very white. She looks back at Elias as the jet doors begin to close with her on the outside, abandoned, exposed, without an exit strategy. The private jet begins to taxi. 8 o'clock in the morning. Sunny. The kind of day that feels like it belongs to a different world entirely. Elias sits in a sun-drenched booth at a small diner. A plate of eggs and bacon sits before him. The eggs are getting cold. He doesn't seem to notice. On the table in front of him is a new passport. The name inside reads Mark Stevens. He pulls out the photograph of Lucas. He flips it over. On the back, he has written a note in his own handwriting. Trust is the most expensive lie. The diner TV plays a news report. An explosion in the industrial district. A warehouse fire. The fire department unable to determine the cause. Several missing persons. The buyer. His guards. The evidence. Sarah's voice on the recorder. The warehouse burned for 3 hours before the fire department arrived. Elias takes a bite of toast and watches the smoke rise on the screen. He doesn't flinch. He drops a $100 bill on the table. Too much money, the kind of tip a man leaves when he's trying not to be remembered, and walks out into the sunlight. The electronic bell chime of the door closing behind him is the last sound he hears from his old life. The bright glare of the morning sun swallows his silhouette as he walks down the street. The diner's door swings slowly closed. The waitress reaches down to pick up the $100 bill. She counts it twice, confused, before sliding it into her apron pocket. On the TV behind the counter, the warehouse fire report continues playing. No one in the diner is watching anymore.